Well, let's start with a big data point which is moving markets around the world. Inflation in the United States is accelerating, but in line with expectations. On a month-on-month basis, inflation in the month of Feb rose by 0.4%. On an annual basis, it rose 6%. Core inflation, which does not include food and fuel prices, rose by 5.5%. Now, all of this signals that the Federal Reserve could be back on track for another rate hike next week, despite the turmoil in the banking industry because of the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank. Steve Leisman is here with more details on the inflation data and what it means for the markets.
They have a lot of work to do here. They've still got an inflation problem, but I think they'll feel like they have at least some wiggle room in that it was not worse than expected. There's one thing I'm a little, I guess, concerned about here. We'll see what to do with that, but I want to double check my number here. I do see that used cars and trucks, the prices were actually down 2.8%, and there's no other way to follow this issue here than listen to Phil LeBeau, who says that number is rising. So I'm a little concerned that this number did not pick up what's really happening in the economy. Sometimes that happens with a lag with the CPI number. I also noticed that your shelter costs, OER, is still at 0.7%. It's a very important expectation at the Fed that this number comes down. It's about a third of the CPI, and it will hopefully come down, and that will be a big part of why the Fed can relax a little bit. I think this number, just to sum up, because it is not worse than expected, the Fed has the latitude or flexibility to pause if it feels it needs to because of the financial conditions.
So Steve Leisman there with the latest on U.S. inflation. Now, the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank continues to send ripples through the global markets. Global financial stocks lost an eye-popping $465 billion in trade, despite the steps taken by the U.S. government to protect the money of depositors and avoid a contagion. In fact, credit ratings agency Moody's has put 6 U.S. lenders on review for a potential downgrade. These include First Republic, Western Alliance, Bancorp, Intrust Financial Corp, among others. Now, Moody's cited concerns over the reliance on uninsured deposit funding and unrealized losses in their asset portfolios. Yesterday, in fact, U.S. President Joe Biden assured investors that the U.S. banking system is safe. Depositors at the Silicon Valley Bank have gotten access to their accounts back home. And back home, Rajiv Chandrasekhar met startups in the country and spoke to them, and here's what he had to say.
Clearly, it is a liquidity issue because there is going to be a delay, as we understand it from today's engagement with the startups, between when the startups want the money that they have deposited in the bank versus when the deposits will be made available to them. So that mismatch is causing concerns about liquidity in many of the startups. And that is primarily one of the issues that they have requested the government to help them with. And we have certainly discussed 2 or 3 alternate options in today's consultation, which I will be forwarding to the Reserve Bank of India and the Ministry of Finance, the Finance Minister herself. So we hope to have that problem addressed by the RBI and the Ministry of Finance pretty soon. To the larger problem of trauma, and is certainly not a great thing for a 25-year-old or a 28-year-old who's building a SaaS platform, who's deploying innovation for US customers and enterprises, to be faced with an existential threat of a bank shutting down. So I think there is that broader issue of trauma and fear and concern in many of our startups, and we have made it very clear today to them that the government of India under Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji is absolutely laser focused.
So what advice have you given to the startups? What do you feel are going to be the learnings for them? Is this going to be a tough year for startups?
The Silicon Valley Bank is less to do with that broad trend and more to do with the fact that startups who are focused on innovating, market challenges, create competitor and peer challenges, have never had to deal with a bank going bust from under their chairs.
Well, taking that story forward, India was not really immune from the global market fall, and it was a volatile session on the last trade today where major indices lost for the fourth straight session. That is in trade today. Now, the Sensex fell by over 300 points. The Nifty slipped over 100 points. BSE companies have erased about 6.5 lakh crores in market capitalization over the last 2 days.
And Adani stocks were under pressure today after recovering for 9 straight sessions. Investor wealth to the tune of 42,000 crore rupees got wiped out today after all 10 stocks ended in the red. A Morning Context report published on Monday, 13th of March, reported that Ambuja Cements and ACC are owned not by the Adani Group, but by Vinod Adani-controlled entities. CNBC-TV18 has gone over the disclosure made in the open offer document for Ambuja Cement and verified the same. The disclosure reads, and I quote, "The ultimate beneficial ownership of the acquirer is held by Mr. Vinod Shantilal Adani and Mrs. Ranjan Ben Vinod Adani." End quote. The point of concern on this is that the Adani Group had indicated in its response to Hindenburg's allegations that Vinod Adani is not a related party. We wait a response from the Adani Group for greater clarity on the subject.
Well, and there's more layoffs in the tech space. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg has said that the firm is going to be reducing its workforce by another 10,000 employees as part of its restructuring plans. Now, this comes just 4 months after the company laid off 11,000 employees. The company has also announced that it will close down about 5,000 new roles, which have yet to be filled.
Our company Cipla is being investigated by the IT department. Sources are telling us that the Income Tax Department's survey at Cipla is focused on tax avoidance and violations. IT department is probing if Cipla made wrongful claims worth 400 crore rupees under an IT provision that provides for 100% deductions. Sources say the IT department is also probing wrongful deductions of 1,300 crore rupees claimed for research and development.
Well, demand for office leasing, that remains strong despite the slowdown in the IT industry. That is the word coming in from Sriram Khattar, who is the managing director of DLS Rental Business. In an exclusive conversation with my colleague Jude Sanit, Khattar said that India's office space market remains an attractive destination for international companies. Take a look.
Numeric figures of 15.4 and 8.4, but if you normalize over the last 5 years, and you see the normalized growth over the next 5-7 years, the growth is going to be very good. See, one thing COVID has done is prove to the world that India has a very strong digital backbone to provide the best of IT services in the most trying of times.
Right.
That clubbed with the fact that India is able to offer English-speaking, technology-savvy youngsters at a fraction of a cost. And real estate of global standards coming at a fraction of a cost make India a very compelling destination for growth of international companies. So that growth will continue to happen. A few percentage points more or less is a matter from year to year. But the base level of
CNBC-TV18's campaign Future Female Forward aims to bridge gender inequality, fight for equal pay and an equal society for women. Today we held what is the largest summit on gender parity in India. Here are some of the highlights.
She sat at the back and they said she was shy. She led from the front and they hated her pride. They asked her advice and then questioned her guidance.
I used to sell cosmetics for 200 bucks a day. And now I sit 10 kilometers away in the minister's house.
कुछ परिस्थितियाँ ऐसी होती है जो सब कुछ सिखा जाती है
जिससे डर लगे वो जरूर करो
मोटिवेट योर गर्ल चाइल्ड टू जॉइन द फोर्सेस बिकॉज वहाँ पे जाके वो अपना कॉन्फिडेंस वहाँ पे अपना टैलेंट वो सारी चीज़ें उनको दिखाने का मौका मिलेगा
वेयरिंग दिस यूनिफॉर्म एंड स्टैंडिंग हियर इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट प्राउड मोमेंट्स ऑफ माई लाइफ
Women have talent, women have courage, and these are can-do women.
वाकई हाँ महिला होना गर्व की बात है और हमारी भी वैल्यू है
This is my time.
Well, that is our campaign, Future Female Forward. But even as we celebrate these glass ceiling smashers, a CNBC-TV18 and FICCI survey highlights that women form only about 30% of the workforce even today. The gender divide in corporate leadership positions is even more stark. Only 2 out of every 10 C-suite executives were women. Archana Solanki gets us the key findings of this survey.
For it to be India's century and not just India's decade, it's important to keep underlining the importance of women participation in workforce. So CNBC-TV18 and FICCI collaborated to put the spotlight on the same. 80 companies across 12 sectors with a turnover of over 20 crore rupees to 7 lakh crore rupees were surveyed in the month of February. 60% respondents belonged to the manufacturing sector, while 40% were in services. Let's now look at the gender composition of this survey. 69% of males and 31% females were surveyed. Let's move on and take a look at the attrition pattern in these 80 companies. The highest rate of attrition in women was seen in the 20 to 30 age group, which is 15%. 30 to 40 age group saw 13% attrition, 40 to 50 age group 7%, and the lowest was seen in the 50 to 60 age group, which is 3%. Another important finding of this survey was the representation of women in leadership roles. In these companies, 22% of women were at the board of directors and 21% were C-suite executives. And what kind of roles have been undertaken by women in these companies? Human resources, 82% of women. Finance, 59%. Admin, 57%. Marketing, 57%. Sales, 51%. IT and digital, 49%. Strategy at 35%. All right, let's talk about the key policies. Now, these companies have made some policies to encourage more women in their staff. Now, which are these? 90% of companies have POSH, which is prevention of sexual harassment policy, non-recruitment, not discriminatory recruitment, 90%, infrastructure, 78%. 73% companies have extended maternity benefits. 71% of these companies have flexible timings. 48% of these companies have flexible location, and 43% of these companies have transportation facilities for women. But what happens when a woman takes a long break? Case in point, maternity leave. This survey says that 52% companies have reskilling programs, while 48% don't. Most companies in the survey have said that they absorbed their women employees in the same department and location after they returned from their maternity leaves. The study has also made some policy recommendations to the government. It has urged the government to give more scholarships to encourage women in STEM fields, that is science, technology, engineering and mathematics. They've also urged legislation on gender pay parity, mainstreaming gender in existing programs, and equal paternity leave policy to enable men to share childcare responsibilities with women.
So still some way to go there. Thank you so much for those details, Archana. On that note, it is time for us to head into a short break. But coming up next, farmers resume their 200-kilometer march from Nashik to Mumbai to press their multiple demands, including adequate compensation for onions and fair prices for crops. That and more on the other side. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. You're watching India Business Hour. Here's a quick look at some of the other stories that we're tracking today. Now, farmers in Maharashtra continued their long march from Nashik to Mumbai, demanding higher prices for their produce, among other demands. Santya Gora gets us more from the Mumbai-Nashik highway.
This is the second day of farmers' long march in Maharashtra. We are on Mumbai-Nashik highway and you can see this huge crowd. Over 15,000 farmers are walking on this highway. They officially started this march from Nashik city and most of these farmers actually have come from different regions of Maharashtra. Gavit ji, हमसे बात करने के लिए शुक्रिया. मेरा पहला सवाल आपसे ये है कि क्या स्टेट गवर्नमेंट की साइड से कुछ अब क्लैरिटी आई है कि कोई अगली मीटिंग जो है वो कब होने वाली है, क्योंकि कल जो मीटिंग आज होने वाली थी वो तो पोस्टपोन हो गई.
हाँ, कैंसिल हो गई. तो अभी तक तो कोई ऐसा मैसेज नहीं आया, लेकिन हमें लगता है कल दोपहर को 3 बजे हमें बुलाएंगे. वो हमारा वो जो 2018 का लॉन्ग मार्च था, वो लॉन्ग मार्च में फॉरेस्ट की मांग थी और नदी जोड़ प्रकल्प जो था वो पश्चिम के दिशा में जाने वाला पानी वो डाइवर्ट करके वो पूर्व दिशा में लाने का, ये 2 सवाल प्रमुख थे. बाकी थोड़े दूसरे थे, लेकिन वो फॉरेस्ट का थोड़ा मांग माना, लेकिन बाकी जो था उसमें बहुत सारा गड़बड़ कर दिया.
As far as Forest Rights Act implementation is concerned, he said that to some extent it was met, but not completely, not fully. So the march continues, and that also, this particular demand is also on the list of demands. Apart from that, a fair compensation for onion crop is one of the demands. A proper compensation for all the crops which got damaged because of unseasonal rains is another demand, and the march continues on the second day as well.
So those are the demands from the farmers there, Nashik. But CNBC-TV18's Future Female Forward, the Gender Parity Summit, felicitated women from all walks of life, be it from the Indian Army to the Navy and the Air Force, also from agriculture and handicrafts. The Women's Collective pushed forward the conversation as policymakers, industry bigwigs, activists and artists talk about the steps needed to bridge gender disparity. Take a look.
On the table of the G20, now women's issues are no longer relegated to the sidelines. Correct. We have them resolutely placed as a main agenda of the G20. That being India's contribution fills me with great joy and pride. What is sweetly complex about it is that it has been brought to the main table, as you say, by a male Prime Minister.
You know, we are well on the way to integrating women into all roles in the Navy. I would say all roles, all ranks. I mean, that is what, you know, the Navy is looking forward to as a vision for the future. My advice is that, you know, you should not look at the gender, see whether they are professionally competent, and it should be a meritocracy.
Well, in other news, the Supreme Court has dismissed the centre's plea seeking additional compensation of 7,844 crore rupees for victims in the 1984 Bhopal gas tragedy. The court observed that the centre is seeking additional compensation after opposing previous attempts by private parties and also claiming that the settlement amount was valid and sufficient.
And the parliament was adjourned today amid a standoff between the BJP and Congress over Rahul Gandhi's speech at Cambridge University. BJP has been demanding an apology on Gandhi's remark of a disappearing democracy. Meanwhile, the Congress protested with placards of Prime Minister Modi's quotes from speeches during his visits abroad.
The battle for eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut continued, with both Russia and Ukraine reporting heavy losses. Zelensky has said that Russian forces must be stopped in Bakhmut and other eastern Ukrainian towns.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's illegal migration bill received major backlash. The bill seeks to deport all asylum seekers who enter the UK illegally, sending them back home or to a safe third country, with a lifetime ban on citizenship and re-entry. This comes after the number of people entering the UK on small boats rose 60% from 2021 to 2022.
The United States, Australia and UK inked a significant naval deal to ensure stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, under the deal, Australia is set to get nuclear power attack submarines by 2030. The deal has irked China, which has said the three nations are walking down a path of error and danger.
And with that, it is a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. Many thanks for watching.
On that note, do stay with us. We will be back with more news and updates after this short break.